Welcome to Storytime Pitches. I am your host, Josh, and I am here with my wonderful friend,
Kurt.
Curticus, or Curtaroni, or whatever you want to call
Yeah, they all work. They all work.
him. Well, we got an interesting episode for you guys today. I've had this idea for, I want to say about 10 years ago, I first came up with an inkling of this idea, and I did write it down. I sent it in for copyright and all kinds of stuff. It's actually one of the only things I ever sent in for copyright, but I mean, it was 10 years ago. I feel like it's time to elaborate on it. I said time on purpose there, but we're going to take a break from the supernatural stuff. I mean, we love our horror movies and our horror TV shows and all that stuff, but I feel like we've had a lot of that lately, and that's pretty much going to be the main focus of everything we come up with. But, if you turn on the TV anytime, pretty much everything out there is supernatural related, so...
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of it lately. But,
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it's all good in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, everything. You could literally just talk about the Vampire Diaries or, all these shows that are, everything out there eventually turned into something supernatural. Even if it wasn't at the beginning, like the Arrowverse and all those, they start bringing people back from the dead and dealing with stuff like that. And it's like everything turns supernatural at some point. So it's kind of hard to avoid that. But this one we thought would be really good because it is a little bit different than what we normally throw at you guys.
All right, well, I am dying to hear this one.
Oh, are you? Dying, just like the supernatural stuff that we're trying to avoid.
I got an arrow in my side, just waiting to hear the story.
Okay. That was I'm trying to get my arrow out. All right, so, really original title here. It's called Time.
Ooh, spooky.
Just simple. I imagine when it shows the title card, because this is a TV show, back up. This is a TV show idea. So every episode starts with, the title card. And I imagine it being if you ever seen Drag Me to Hell or something like that, when it starts and it shows the title of the screen, it's just "Ah!" and it just shows the text all ginormous on the screen. That's kind of how I imagine it. So basically it'll be time really big across your screen, and then all this glass kind of cracks your TV's cracking, and then it breaks, and then we're in the show. So pretty simple, but I imagine it being a very intense thriller, I guess is a better way to say this, like a drama thriller. Huge influence would be Lost, Prison Break, especially the later seasons of Prison Break, and 24, which 24, if anybody knows me, is probably one of my favorite TV shows ever. It is highly dated now, but the thing is most of the TV that is out right now, wouldn't be what it is without Lost or 24 or even Prison Break to a point. I will say that the earlier seasons of Prison Break are a lot better. I don't know if you've watched any of these, have you?
I think I started Prison Break, but I didn't get very far. I think at that time I was working quite a bit, and so I didn't really have time to get through those.
See what you did there. Well, I'm going to spoil it a tiny bit. First off, I didn't watch these shows when they were on TV, because I was younger. I thought TV was dumb. I really did. And then for whatever reason, somebody somewhere started talking about all these TV shows and stuff like that. And I started talking to my stepdad, Bill, about it. And he loves 24 and Battlestar Galactica and stuff like that. I'm like, what is up with these TV shows that everybody's all crazy about right now? And he's like, 24 is awesome. It's intense. Every episode's a cliffhanger and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, right. So I ended up starting to watch it with my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, Brittany. And dude, the first night, we must have watched almost the entire first season, which is 24 episodes. It takes place in real time, so every episode is an hour long. And we stayed up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and woke up at 7 or 8 in the morning and watched more. I was addicted, and it's an awesome show. And yeah, like I said, it's dated with its subject matter and the filming of it, like you can really tell it's pre-HD. It's funny because there's like boom mics coming in the shot if you watch it in widescreen now because they planned on it being 3x4. But anyway,
That's awesome.
so Prison Break, I'm gonna spoil it just a little bit, like I said. So basically at the beginning, there's a guy in prison and his brother wants to break him out, and he basically was an architect that helped build this prison. So he goes and gets all these crazy tattoos, and the tattoos are like linked to this prison. So like he has like a cross on his chest or something, and once he like builds like it looks like a shiv or something, and he files it down underneath his bed like on the concrete until it gets the exact size of that cross, because that's exactly the size that he needs to like open the cell door or something. Like it's like all this crazy thought out stuff, and it really is mind blowing to see the depth that they put into the thought of what goes into his tattoos and how it actually breaks him out. Like parts of it are maps and all kinds of stuff, and it ends up being a really good story. But of course, you're dealing with a human factor, and nothing ever works out. But I mean, it lasted for 5 seasons and even had a revival. But the thing that I said I was going to spoil a little bit, because that's just the plot, is that eventually, like, he gets out and they want him to break into like places.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually it gets to the point where like the government is like hiring him to go overseas and like break people out of, Middle Eastern prisons, or going in and infiltrating like secret companies that are operating illegally and stuff like that. And it ends up being like really cool and detailed. And that's kind of like a lot of the inspiration of where I came up with this show. So basically, the show is called Time, and it is about a time machine, and it's about people that are immune to the time machine.
Ooh, that's a pretty good idea.
Okay, so if someone goes back in time and changes anything, the whole universe would have no idea. We would just be in that new timeline. And it would be like nothing ever happened. We just go about our lives. We would still be doing this podcast right now, like no idea. And this story is about one guy at first, and his name is James Caden in my story, which is funny because later on DC made a character called Caden James. But that's a different story. So we'll just say James. So James is like a total normal guy. He works in like a cubicle office type thing, and he just has a wife, no kids, nothing like that. They live in a modest apartment in, some mediocre city, nothing too fancy. Maybe they live in, Denver or something like that. Not like New York City or Los Angeles or something. Let's say they live in Denver, or like, Albuquerque or something like that. So
Okay.
one day, he's just going about his business, and, he's talking to his friend and all that. And he's like, yeah, like I really need to ask for that raise and all that. And his friend's like, well, go do it. Like the boss is in a good mood today and stuff. So, he goes in there and he talks to the boss and everything. And the boss is like, I don't know. It's just not a good time. And like, this is going on in the economy, and, like we can make it modern so we can throw, COVID related stuff in there and just be like, the company's just not making the money that it used to. Like, you're going to have to wait, anywhere from 6 months to a year before we can even have this conversation. So he's not being rude, but he's definitely being like, eh. So he walks out, and the boss kind of calls him back in. He sticks his head back in the door, and he's like, you know what? He's like, you've been here for, 6 years. Like, you work hard. Like, you deserve it. We're going to give you a raise. And he just freaks out, and he's like, oh my God. He's like, yeah. He's like, whatever. I'm the best boss. Like, go call your wife. Tell her, He's like, sweet. So he runs out, and he like gives his friend the thumbs up, and he goes to the hallway, and he's calling his wife on the phone. His wife like answers, and we get to meet her and everything. And he's telling her the news, and she's like, oh, that's awesome and stuff. And she's like, oh, now we can finally do this and, plan on buying a house and maybe have a baby. And he's like super ecstatic and all this. So when this is happening, I imagine this is how we do time flashes. So the audience sees it, but they have no idea. So your screen is going to start cracking like glass. and it's just going to slowly, gradually do it. Like some time flashes are going to go super fast out of nowhere. It's just gonna be like, and we're going to be in another timeline. But the first one kind of goes slow. It's gradual. So, like when he's talking to his boss, you might see a crack come up the bottom of the screen and then another one come off the left side of the screen. And it just progresses until the glass breaks. So he's on the phone telling her all this news, and the time flash happens. And he ends up in the Middle East, like in the middle of a desert. And like the sandstorm's coming in, and there's like a couple people in the distance and stuff, and he just has no idea what just happened. He's still holding his hand up to his head like he was on the phone, but he looks at his hand and there's nothing there. Like he's dressed completely differently, and he just starts wandering around, and he's like trying to yell at the people in the distance, like, hey, like what happened? Where am I? And they don't even know, and they're just running to get away from the storm. They got like their animals that they're trying to bring inside their little homes and stuff. And there's like another guy that's kind of walking by, and he's like talking to him, and he's speaking, in Arabic, and he has no idea what he's saying. And the guy's like, okay, come on. And he just like kind of waves. So, like he has a hood thing, and he puts it like over his head, and they take him inside, and this guy has like a little bunker. It's not like in the middle of the desert, but it's, pretty far out there, and there's houses here and there kind of thing. But anyway, he goes in there, and this old man helps him like pat off all the dust and all that. And then he's like, oh, like, are you hungry? And he's like, oh, you speak English? And he's like, well, like a little bit. So he's like trying to explain to him, like, I don't know what happened. Like, what am I doing here? And all this stuff. And then the guy's like, hey, like, just like the storm's bad. Like, you stay. And he's like, what happened? Like, I was in my office and all this stuff. He's like, I lost time. Did I black out? And he's like, you stay, like storm, and he's just like, whatever. So eventually he kind of just gives in to this guy, and the guy makes him dinner and everything like that. And they kind of wait for the storm to pass, and he's trying to figure out everything that's going on. Like he's just racking his brain at what the heck happened. As the audience, we like still don't quite know yet. I know I explained the plot of it already, but if the show was like just starting, this would all be in the first like 3 or 4 minutes. Like you would have no idea what's happening. Eventually he sits down and he tries to have a conversation with this guy, and the guy tells him, like we're in, I don't know the country yet. I'm just making it up as I go. Like I said, I came up with the idea, and I'm just elaborating on the bullet points that I remember. But, he finds out that he's in, a completely different country in the Middle East. And, he's like, well, like, I don't know what to do. I basically just got to sit this out. And he falls asleep that night. And in the middle of the night, like the storm kind of subsides. So early in the morning before they wake up, like their door gets busted down, and like these radical terrorist guys come in. And like I said, this might sound a little dated and everything and stereotypical, but it grows from here. So trust me. So they kick in the door, they like raid this place, they like knock the old guy out, and they're yelling at him about like harboring like fugitives and things like that. And like they shoot the guy. So these guys like mean business. And like James is freaking out, because he's just a skinny little business dude, that did like calculations for some big company. Like he has no idea how to handle this situation. And they look at him and they see, American and all that. So they think he's important, and they knock him out, and then they drag him in the back of their truck, and then they take off. They end up taking him to like one of their bases, obviously not where the leader like stays, but they take him to one of the bases for interrogation, and they're going to put him out there and, send out ransom videos and stuff, see if, America will pay up or if he's anybody important. And this process kind of goes on for a little bit. So basically they do all the torture stuff, the waterboarding and all that. And then he's not giving up any information. Like he's sticking with his story. So they're like, we're going to kill this guy. Like that's it. Like there's actually a time range where they keep these hostages in real life, before they statistically usually do kill them if they don't get any information, or unless there's somebody important, and they're waiting for a ransom. But You know, they don't know anything, so, or he doesn't know anything, so they just give it up and they're going to kill him. So as this is happening, they kind of walk in the room. He's tied to a chair. They hold the gun up to his head, and right as this is about to happen, like you hear this kid like yelling, and they're like, "What is that?" You know? And then like one of the guys kind of goes out there, and there's a kid up there, and he's holding up like this piece of paper, and he's talking to him, and he's showing him like this piece of paper, and James kind of sees it like through the hallway, through the crack of the door, and this kid is showing him a piece of paper of James like coming out of the sand. And then like one of the guys comes back in, like he's like a higher up guy and he can actually speak English. So he comes in and he's like, "Is this you?" And he's like, "What?" Like, no, what are you talking about? And he's like, this picture, is this you? Did you come out of the sand? And he's like, well, he's like, I was in like my office and I just appeared here. Like, and next thing I know, you guys are dragging me here and all this stuff. And he's like, so you came out of the sand? And then he's like, well, yes. So they go and they start having a conversation with each other, and they're all like really like changing their mind basically. And turns out that there's like some prophecy or something like that about a guy that will appear out of the sand, like a god or something, you know, or a savior, whatever it is. We're not going to actually figure out what that is, but basically it just moves the story along. So they decide to keep him alive because of this. Like they think he's just some skinny dude, like, and that's the end of it, and he's nobody important. So the fact that he fulfills part of this prophecy, they want to keep him alive, and they start training him, and they put him through some of the processes that they put, like the kids and stuff that they take from families and all that. They start like training him to be one of them. You know, they figure they can use him for like secret op missions or something like that because he's American. He can get into these bases and stuff and act like he ran away from these people that were holding him and then get in there and infiltrate them or blow them up or something. So they think he's going to be a big asset. And this goes on for a while. So I imagine this is like the first like 30 minutes of the first episode, you know, and like most shows are about 42, 43 minutes. So this is a huge chunk that this is all taking place. And they train him and they send him on like, I almost imagine it like we kind of montage it a little bit. And then they send him on like a pretty big mission where he's supposed to like infiltrate this place. And we see that he is not that person anymore that he started as. So he, you know, he's at training, like he's way physically fit now. And he's got like mad skill when it comes to like fighting and weapons and everything. So he basically just goes in this place by himself and just John McClane's the crap out of these people and gets what they need. Like he's still himself, you know, like I imagine he's not like killing people, you know, like he gets in there and just subdues everybody basically. Like, I mean, he's our hero, so we don't want him to be overboard like that. But he gets what he's supposed to get and he gets out of there. And they're all like freaking out when he comes back because they thought he was going to die for sure or get captured or something. And so they're like, oh, this is pretty awesome and stuff. And then as soon as like he hands over like this briefcase or whatever that they wanted, they knock him out. And then he's like, what? Like, what was, or they hit him over the head. And he's like, well, what are you doing? Like, what was that for? And they're like, like we knew you were a spy. And bam, hit him again, knock him out. He wakes up in this room and like he's get all groggy, like looking around and stuff. And he sees next to him, there's like a woman in a chair, like right next to him that's tied up with a bag over her head. And he's like super confused and he's like, hey. And he's like trying to kick her chair. Like, who are you? Like, what is this? And then like, she's kind of slowly coming to, and the guy that runs this particular base, like that he's kind of been working with, and I don't want to say friends, but the ones that he's been a little bit more friendly with, you know, like the guy comes in, right, and he pulls the bag off of her head and he's like, this your friend? And he's like, what? Like, no, I've never seen her in my life. Like, and he's like, she says she knows you. She said your name is James. And he's like, what? Like, he has no idea what's happening. And he's like, okay. He's like, the big boss will be here soon. Like, we'll find out the truth. And he like leaves the room. And they're just sitting here tied up to these chairs in this room. And she looks at him and she's like, James, like, I need you to listen to me very carefully. And he's like, what? Like, who are you? She's like, my name is Tyler, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. So he kind of like settles in, like, all right, here we go. And she tells him there is a secret society or a company or something out there that has a time machine. And they went back and changed something in time. And then he's like, yeah, okay, like you're crazy. And she's like, think about it. She's like, you were probably doing something completely normal and everything moved around you and all of a sudden you were in a different place, in a different body, in a different timeline. She's like, you're still yourself because you retained all the memories from your first life, but this is another version of that. So he starts like thinking about it and he's like, well, even if that is real, like how do we get out of this situation? Because he's thinking like right now, because he knows these guys are serious. And she's telling him like, I came to save you. I came to rescue you. And he's like, yeah, like how are we going to do that? And she's like, there are other people out there like us. And we've, we're still learning it ourselves, but we've kind of figured out hints around us that tell us that another time flash is about to happen. And he's like, okay, well, how many times has this happened? And she's like, as far as we know, it's only happened once. And then he's like, okay, yeah, you're crazy. Because let's just say, like, I went with you on this. It's only happened once, and you guys already think that you know signs that it's going to happen again. And she's like, yeah. She's like, I do. And as this is happening, like, you hear the footsteps coming down the hall of whoever this leader is of this specific terrorist group. And she's like, I know you don't believe me, but wait till you see who walks through this door, and you will. And he's like, yeah, okay. So the guy comes in, and we kind of show like the boots and all that, and we show like his reaction on his face. And he's like dead, dead scared, like turns like as white as a ghost. And then we show that it's Saddam Hussein, which, he's a terrible terrorist that died way back in what, like the late 90s, early 2000s. But basically, he doesn't have a scratch on him. Like it never happened. Like whatever they changed kept him alive. And like James knows it instantly exactly who this is. And then he says his name too. He's like, Saddam Hussein? And he looks at him like, how do you know my name? Like, I've lived in the shadows like my entire life. Like nobody's ever said my name aloud. Like, how do you know my name? And he's like, but you're dead. And he's like, do I look dead to you? And like stuff like that. And then, he like makes all these threats and kind of walks around him in a circle. And as this is happening, Tyler starts just talking crap because she's kind of feisty. Like she was a police officer in her first life. And not only that, she was a young police officer. And so she is used to dealing with that kind of like bullying, I guess. So she starts talking crap, and James is sitting here like, what are you doing right now? And she's just talking mad crap to Saddam, and he's like not having it. And then he pulls out the gun and he holds it to like the back of her head, and then she like winks at James, and then all of a sudden like the screen cracks, and then they end up in another timeline. And that's the end of the first episode. So it's a lot for the first episode, and I'm not going to go into like crazy detail about what happens in every episode, but I'll give you the gist of like the bullet points of where it goes from there. So the second episode, James, actually kind of the cliffhanger of the first episode. So when the screen breaks and he ends up in another timeline, he's just sitting out on like a porch on the backside of a house, and like the lawnmower is like running and stuff, and he's got like a beer in his hand, and he drops the beer and he's like, what, like, where am I? And he's like looking at the yard, he's all confused. It's like some beautiful like suburban home, and like this kid like runs out the back door behind him, scares him, runs up and like hugs his leg, and he's like, I love you, Dad. And then he like runs out in the yard and goes and starts playing. And then that's the end of the first episode. Just like, what is happening?
This is pretty crazy. Like it's almost like a Alice in Wonderland. I mean, just that like crazy, you never know where it's going to go.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty awesome because there's nothing on TV, that is like this, you know. So I think that's pretty unique.
Yeah, and like we were talking about, like everything's supernatural right now. So getting something that's a little different, is interesting because I feel like the next big thing is going to be the fantasy stuff, and that's cool too. Like I think there's always been fantasy stuff, but I just feel like it's going to get really heavy over like the next 10 years. Like I know they're doing like the Lord of the Rings show, and of course they're adapting like every book ever made too. But so yeah, so from here we realize that everything that Tyler was saying is true, that there really is a secret society or a company or something out there that is controlling this time machine. So as the show kind of progresses, these people, we realize that I haven't quite worked out the details on this part, but let's say they use like some kind of crazy injections or something like that, like nanobot injections that will allow them to travel into a different version of time. So if they go back and change something in their favor in the past to make them more rich or more successful when everything goes back, they will inject themselves and not have any of the symptoms. And since this is like a secret society, they all have like a schedule and like they take turns doing this and they have to like meticulously plan these things out so everyone is aware of what the change is going to be, when it's going to happen, the time it's going to happen, and everything. So all these people have like these little like mini briefcase things with these injections in it, and they know like their phone will go off or their watch or something, like, oh, okay, like 5 minutes till time flash time or whatever they call it, and they know to like inject themselves. And then when whoever has the time machine at that point or has access to it goes back and changes it, they all just keep living the same lives that they were living. So like they're always on top. And we could go really deep conspiracy into this, like basically that this has been happening as far as we can think, and like everything that I don't know, maybe it's Illuminati or something, like everything they've ever done to influence society from their beginning, from their roots, has culminated at the building of this time machine and the fact that it actually works now. So they were already all powerful to begin with, and now they're just completely taking over everybody that they can't control. This is their main goal. And these people that are immune to the time machine naturally are like the cog in the machine. So they start getting wind that there might be some people out there that can do this like naturally, and they start calling them the immunists. And they want to figure out why, because these injections are not cheap, they're not easy, and they're extremely painful. So like when they inject themselves, it's like the most massive pain anybody's ever had just to survive and move into a different timeline. So they want to figure out how this is such a breeze for these people. And James is an idiot. He's smart when it comes to his first job and his first life, and he's stupid when it comes to anything else. So he immediately like starts hopping on his computer and like Googling time machine and this and this and this, and just looking up all this stuff that is going to get flagged at some point. And like he ends up like triggering them, and they find out where he is and they come after him. So I imagine like he lives in kind of like a nice little town kind of thing, and then he gets like Men in Black kind of things that show up at his door, and they kind of play it casual at first, like, oh, like, we're just here to ask you a few questions and blah 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 blah. And he already knows like something's up because of his training and all that. So he's like, oh, okay, like yeah, like calls him inside or brings him inside, sits him down, like, you guys want some like water or tea or something like that. Like as this is happening, like he's just having this conversation and he's like pouring like stuff into their tea to like knock them out and stuff. And like he can see like their reflection like in the microwave above the stove or something that they're about to pull out like a gun and all that. So he like
Hmm.
turns around and like throws the tea in their face and like beats the crap out of these guys. And he gets his son. I don't know his son's name, but he's like we gotta go, and he like grabs him and like they run out to the car, and then they get in the car and then they peel out and then they drive off. And then of course there's like vans waiting down the street and they all start following them and like high speed chase situation. But then like he starts realizing that there's a lot more going on here than just a time machine that's going to change things every single time. He's now realizing that there's people that know he can do this and that they're after him. And of course, as the audience, like you've only met Tyler at this point, so you only know that there's one other person. She says there's more, but we don't know how many or what their pasts are or anything, but we will explore that. So, they basically go through all this, and eventually he like thinks he's going to outsmart them or something, but he starts getting like attached to the kid. At first he wants nothing to do with him. He's like, this ain't my kid and stuff. But in this timeline, it is. Like his wife is dead, and he can see his wife in this kid. He sees himself in this kid, and it kind of like he starts getting attached, like as they're on the run. So eventually, he tries to like outsmart these guys, and it doesn't quite work out. They end up like kidnapping the kid, and the guys are talking to each other, and they're just like, you know what, like if this is his kid, like he has the DNA, maybe he's immune to the time machine too, or whatever. And they take the kid, so James has to go on like a rescue mission, and this lasts for probably 2 or 3 episodes, let's say. And eventually Tyler finds him again, and they kind of team up, and this is kind of the first time we see that, but they end up eventually getting the kid back and everything. And of course, right when this happens, they realize who the guy that's in charge of this specific like region of this secret society is. And for all the Supernatural fans out there, I kind of imagine this in my head that Mark Sheppard would play him, like the guy who plays Crowley in Supernatural. He's actually in a ton of stuff, but I imagine like he's the guy or somebody like that type. They basically get the kid out of there like right in the nick of time, and then we get the reveal that this is the main bad guy. And then the time flash happens again, and they all get separated again. And then, then from there, like the show kind of just moves along a little faster, but we figure out that there's a couple other people out there that are immune to it, and they come up with a system so when they do have a time flash, they can meet each other in person and get back on task faster, because the whole goal of these immunists is to get back to their first life. So these guys keep going back and changing all these things, and all these people want to do is get back to their first life. Now, all their first lives are pretty decent. One of them, this guy, his name's Blake, he was a criminal and he was in jail, and that's a really interesting story arc for his character. Like I don't want to talk everybody's ear off about all these character backstories, but there's so much detail that goes into all these characters. But there's 5 of them total. One of them we find out is actually, I'll just call him Crowley from Supernatural, is his daughter. So we find out that she is one of the immunists, but we don't know that, and the group doesn't know that at all. And of course, he doesn't know it either at first. But she ends up kind of befriending these people and like seeing their struggles and like realizing that all these things are happening. So she kind of starts changing the way that she's thinking about it, because she's not necessarily a good person. She's very like Michelle Rodriguez type, like balls to the wall. Like she's the first one to run in there and, Leroy Jenkins everybody, and everyone's like, no, that wasn't the plan. But she's just having fun with it. She's like kind of that neutral chaos kind of character. And another guy, I think his name's Mark, if I remember right. He is like a ex-Marine, and he was like dishonorably discharged. And he's basically like living at home and just like a drunk, like all kinds of stuff like that. And then this starts happening to him. So he's actually having something to like live for now. Like he wants to take this company down. Like yeah, he doesn't necessarily want to get back to his first life, but at the same time, he realizes that if he does, he can set things right for everything that he can atone for everything that he did. And of course, we will find out all that stuff as it goes. But yeah, eventually, I imagine that they will capture, you know, probably Tyler or something important, like a really important character, and they'll start experimenting on her. And like James will have to go in and save her because, like any good story, like everybody's going to be on a team, off a team, on a team. They're going to bicker and argue and drama. Like some of them might like each other and other things like that, but they're all going to have to eventually figure out how to work together to take down this society. And that's kind of where we're thinking it's going. But the most important thing is that they want to get a hold of this time machine themselves so they can go back and set everything to the first lives. And if they do it right, they can make it like the time machine never happened at all. So that's the main goal of it. And of course, I imagine like this huge epic finale of the first season where they go in there and infiltrate this like bunker that's in the middle of nowhere. Like it's just this giant field, like Area 51 type place. And they go in and, you know, Crowley or whatever is there. I can't think of the name I chose for him in the story, but he's there, and this is where he's got Tyler held and everything. And like they got Blake there too. He's like in a prison cell, like underneath the bunker kind of thing. And we realized that he was falsely accused. Like he was actually like stopping a robbery in his first life, and he like saved some kid's life and everything. But since like the clerk behind the counter got shot by the robber and the robber got away, like he got blamed for everything. And of course he's black, so you know, like we end up having like the social justice part of the show in there too. And we find out that he was falsely accused, and it's like this huge story arc. I know I'm kind of just rushing through it right now, but it's this huge story arc where we see the redemption of his character and everything. And he's more like talking about the fact that he was innocent until he went to jail, and then he had to do some things in there that he's not proud of. Like maybe we don't tell everybody what happened in there, but you know, something he did in there was enough for him to want to basically sacrifice himself in the situation. So I imagine they come in, they try to rescue Tyler at the same time. Like Blake's figuring out how to break out of his cell, and Blake is kind of the guy that goes and sacrifices himself so the rest of them can escape. Of course, they get out, and like the sun's coming up in the morning, and they have this. The time machine is actually in like a truck, and they do that on purpose because they always want it to be on the move, so nobody ever figures out what they're doing. You know, and they disguise it like some random company truck for, you know, Good Time Foods or something that like no one would ever suspect. And you know, they get out there and they open it up, and they're like looking at the time machine, and they're like, oh my god, like it's only a one person seat, like only one of us can go back. And then they start having a conversation because there's four of them left, like which one of us is it going to be? And of course they don't want to send back Crowley's daughter, you know, like she's kind of become their friend, and she's redeemed herself partially through some of these things, but they still do not trust her because she's the one that will kill people. She's the one that will betray them and stab them in the back over and over throughout the show. But they have to work with her because she's immune. And these people are after her too. And so this is when you figure out it's his daughter. So he actually like kind of survives, crawls up out of the bunker. You know, it's this epic like wide shot with the sun coming up behind him and the truck on one side with them standing next to it, and then Crowley on the other side. You know, he's got his guns on him and stuff, and they're just like yelling at each other. And then she tells him like, Dad, like I will join you, like I will help you. And this is when you find out, like everybody's like, what, your dad? And then she's like, I'm sorry guys, like I should have told you a long time ago. She's like, I don't agree with him, like I am here to help you guys. So she like goes up to him, and she's like talking to him. And they're all just like, what do we do? Like, do we pay attention to this? Or are we trying to do the time machine thing still? And then, you know, like Mark's in there, like trying to figure out all the stuff, all the buttons and how to program it and all that. And then Tyler's kind of yelling at him, and James is like the hero of the story, so he's the one like kind of mediating, like telling the girl that's talking to her dad, like, hey, like it's okay, like whatever you've done, like we forgive you, like just come with us now, like we have to get out of here. And she turns to him and she's like, no, like you guys have to go. And then she like kills her dad, like instantly kills him. But I don't know how she does it. Maybe she pulled a grenade before she walked over there or something, and she ends up blowing both of them up. So she sacrifices herself, and
Damn.
it's like super sad, but it's a big redemption arc for her to show the trusting of it, you know. And as this is happening, like Mark kind of had feelings for her, so he's like super distraught, and he like runs over there, and you know he's like crying, freaking out. And then you know Tyler's like, we don't have time for this, like we have to do this right now. Like I don't know why, but there's some huge thing that's happening that's time sensitive. We can figure it out later, but this has to happen like right now. So she's like, Mark's messed up and this, and like I think you're the only person that can do this. So Tyler turns to James and she's like, this is you, like you have to do this. And he's like, okay, like yeah, I'll do it. I'll set it right. I'll get everybody back where they need to be, because now we've lost the I can't think of her name, the daughter. We've lost Blake. Like Mark is messed up now. Tyler's the only one that can kind of hold down this timeline, so James has to be the one to go. So he hops in, makes sure that everything's set, and then it flashes white like a normal time change, and then that's the end of the first season, which is pretty much as far as we're going to go today in this podcast. But maybe if you guys like this, we can do a future one. But I just imagine this like a really high stakes, intense show where everything is a cliffhanger. And the fact that at any given time, a time flash could happen, it ends up being really intense, because let's say they're in the middle of a fight and they're fighting these guys, and you know they're in the middle of a swing punch, and you know the time flash happens like really fast, boom, you know, like it's not a slow one. And all of a sudden, like he's standing, like James is like sitting on a beach, you know, drinking a mimosa, and just bam, like smashes somebody in the face, you know, because he's like in the middle of a kinetic swing. You know, like I imagine another one is, you know, like Tyler's driving a car, like they're in a car chase or something like that. And then like it flashes, time flash, and she's a teacher in a classroom, and she just like slams against the wall for no reason. Like, and it's on like the cameras that they keep in the classrooms now and stuff for like safety reasons. So like they watch the footage, and it ends up going viral of her just sitting there like pointing at the chalkboard, and just boom, just like a ghost like threw her across the room into the wall, kind of thing. So I imagine it's kind of like that, like how fast it goes. Not all of them. Some of them go way slower, you know, like I imagine the one where, because there will be one where James is in the middle of a fight, and you know the screen's breaking all slow, and we're showing the audience the bomb basically, and you're just like, oh god, this is going to be bad. And then it's like slowly cracking more through this whole fight scene, and you're like, oh, this is going to be so bad. And then it finally breaks, and he's chilling on a beach and just backhands the crap out of like his wife or something, like terrible, you know. And then he instantly gets like arrested. It ends up in jail and stuff, and then just happens to be like in the same city as someone else that has to come and save him or bail him out. And you know, just a bunch of drama, you know.
I think the screen cracking is like probably like my favorite part of like all of this, because that adds so much suspense to, you know, like what you're watching, and you're like, oh my god, it's starting, and it's shifting, and you're seeing the shift happen, and you're just in your head, you're like, where is it going to go? Like, where are these people going to go? Because that's five different people's storylines are about to switch, and you know, maybe you did like that storyline that they were in, and you know, that kind of thing. So it really does change like the whole dynamic of like, it's like playing with people, because you know, like when you get into watching a show, you really do like characters, and you like the settings, and you get familiar with, certain things, and then to have something like that, that's completely different. And like, I would almost say, like, if you're a heavy, like, TV show, you know, person, that's going to like really ruin a lot of things for you, because you're like, oh my God, like, where is it going to go? Like, am I going to like the next place? Am I going to like the next people that they're going to interact with? Like, will they ever see those people again? That kind of thing. And so I don't know, that's awesome to me. Like, that gives me so many ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's only, we usually go about an hour for our podcast, but like if this was a 10 or 12 episode season, like you could do so much. And like I imagine it like really playing with people, like you said, like it's not what you expect. Like you get used to things, then all of a sudden things completely flip. Or like a big reveal happens, like you realize that I wish I had my paper in front of me, but that Crowley's daughter is actually not a good person. Like you would find that out like right at the end of an episode or something, and you're like, "What? Like, she's a bad guy or something," and then we flash to a different version. And like, I always think about this episode of the show Misfits. And if you guys have never seen Misfits, it's one of the best superhero shows ever made ever. It's a British show, and it actually has like some really famous people in it who are like in Game of Thrones and all these things now. But this show came out in like 2008 or 9, I think. But there's an episode that deals with something time related. Like one person has like time powers or something. And it wasn't, I'm not like ripping anything off here, but there's an episode where something changes and the Nazis ended up winning World War II. So like everything in society now is run by them. Like they have to wear certain uniforms to school and like all these things, and like everything that they have to do is run by like a Nazi world. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. Like, and we could do stuff like that in this show where it like completely changes the dynamic of everything, So yeah, like what's her face, the daughter just betrayed everybody, but now they're in such a bad timeline that they have no choice but to work with her in order to set things, either set things right or just, get out of this timeline alive. Because that's kind of the high stakes part of this show is we have to set the rules. And the rules are if they die, they die. Like that's it. That's the end of it. They will basically die in that timeline. And yes, when the timeline changes, they might still be alive in another timeline, but it'll be a whole new consciousness and they won't be immune anymore. It's like a one and done thing. Like their first life is the only one that matters as far as the rules go.
Dang, that's like far out there for, this like company that's going back into time. You have to think, like, when it first starts, there's probably like hundreds of people in the world that have this like immunity. And so you have to think, like, does this company have like people that track down these people and just immediately kill them? And like they have to kind of eliminate the playing field of people that can retain their consciousness,
Yeah,
through these like shifts.
that's a really interesting way to do it, because I think it'd be kind of cool if we like explain that in the background, but you didn't really see it. It was just more like, dang, that sucks.
So now, is this show like, is like every single episode something different? I mean, like, I know that they shift quite often, but
No, I think that's kind of cheesy, like the timeline of the week. I think that's kind of cheesy. I think, you know, switching timelines 3 times in the first episode is interesting. And I think the second time or the second episode, probably third episode might be like a whole arc. We'll have like arcs where everything's in the same timeline. I imagine since the time machine was just getting started, that throughout the whole first season, let's say there's 10 to 12 episodes, that there's really maybe only 7 or 8 time flashes, because you got to think like we're not going to get too deep into this secret society that's running it. Like you will find out enough to get answers, but it's not going to be so heavy into that. It's going to be more about the character development. and what they have to go through along the way.
So, well, I mean, like, if the episode's not like every single episode is different, I mean, that's actually kind of nice because it's, it doesn't feel like, what are they, like the 90s shows and, stuff like that. But each person, I think you're going to get extremely attached to like every single character, but having it switch all the time is going to be, what I think's unique for people, because you have to get like it's so fast paced, like you can't really get attached to people. So it's kind of like the slow burn of, Game of Thrones, basically. Like in Game of Thrones, you didn't want to get attached to people, but you did, but you knew that they were always going to be there. So with this show, you're going to learn like really, really quick to not get attached to really anybody, because as soon as something changes, they're gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's crazy. Just to think about like people watching this, sitting on their couch and they're just like, damn it, like that was one of my favorite people. Like,
yeah.
Damn it.
Well, and see, like I kind of talked about the finale, like getting people there, but the thing is like we could definitely kill main characters before that, and I think that'd be kind of cool if like nobody was safe. And I remember what I was gonna say earlier. So, I imagine that eventually, when they start working their way up in the secret society, that they get a hold of somebody important, somebody higher up, that they figure out that there's a time change that's about to happen, and they want to go like interrogate this guy, basically like, where's the time machine, like what are you guys using it for, and just to get information. And they like have him like tied up to this chair and stuff, and of course Mark's like an ex-Marine, so he's all like, like we're gonna freaking torture this guy, and everybody else is pulling out their moral stuff, like, like let's just talk to him, like maybe fake threaten him with some things and stuff. And as this is going, like they find his injection box with all his injections in it, and they're like, this is how they're doing it, like this is how they're transferring through time, and the guy's sitting there like with his mouth shut, like, no, I'm not talking to you guys and stuff. And they're like, and they pull out like the little black book inside of it, and they see like times, and they're like, this code right here, what does this mean? And they're like looking at it, and they're like, blah blah blah, like this is a date and a time, like what time is it? And they like look at the clock, and they're like, this is going to be happening like any minute. And then the guy's like starting to freak out because they're starting to like put it together. And then like I imagine them like kind of getting all cocky at this guy, like, you know what, like we're going to make it to the next timeline. If you don't get one of these injections, you're not. So like, time to spill the beans. So I could imagine them kind of using that against like some of these higher ups in the secret society. And then I can imagine it in the other way around too, like where people in the secret society, like Crowley, getting pissed off at some of these lower level people that are getting, run over by the immunists, basically, and releasing this information to them and getting them closer to the top. So him purposely not telling them that a time flash is going to happen and leaving them in a different version of their timeline, like they could use that as a weapon in a lot of different ways.
I was going to say, like, I don't know if like you wrote this, but I think it'd be kind of cool to like somehow trap somebody in like one certain spot, regardless of like where the time goes. So, ooh, like if they find like a room and they use some sort of technology to like trap a person in that room,
that's clever.
That would be, I mean, in its own way, it would kind of be like a jail cell, because if you can't get out, you're going through multiple jumps, but yet you're stuck exactly like where you were. So everything kind of seems, regardless of like how much time has actually passed,
that's some Doctor Who stuff right there.
Yeah, it's like a sadistic Doctor Who
prison
kind of thing. Like you're just getting old, and like everybody else is changing around you, and just
Dang,
when
that's
they
a good
come
idea.
finally come back.
Well, I mean,
I guess that's
I don't want to go too far into season two, but I will leave like some hints that when James does go back to set everything to the first life, he does go back before the time machine is up and running. But all the information that they gained from the first season, like he knows where it's being built, he knows like how they're transporting in parts to it and things like that. So he uses a lot of the skill that he learned while he was being trained, like in the Middle East, to you know his advantage. So like it's kind of one of those everything happens for a reason type stories. Um, that's kind of the basic plot of season two. So almost like I'm just giving you like a preview, but imagine that in the first episode of season one, everybody's trying to convince him that the time machine is real, and they're trying to like learn it as it goes. And of course, the doctor that created the main ingredient for the time machine, he plays an important factor in season one. And season two, he would be able to go talk to that doctor before he's actually done it, and he's going and finding Tyler and Blake and Mark and the other, God, I can't think of her name, but he's finding them and telling them like, hey, this is going to happen. Like there's going to be a time machine and you guys are going to be immune to it and all this stuff. And then of course they're all going to think he's absolutely insane. And it's a whole different dynamic because he is in his first life and he's the only one that made it, but now he has to choose to live it like this. So instead of just spending time with his wife and going back to his normal job, he has a higher purpose now that he has to put all that on hold to set this right, because it's not that easy. It's not just gonna, he can't just go back and that's the end of it. Otherwise, it's just gonna happen again the same way. So I think that's really interesting way to look at season two. But I love that idea about the revolving prison. Like that'd be so
mm,
awesome if everything completely went wrong and something happened where somebody else, because he went back and did that, somebody else got access to the time machine and made it even worse than what we were seeing in the first season. And then, yeah, somebody gets put in that prison. But I don't know. We can save that for another podcast and go into real detail about that. But like, I mean, I hope everybody likes this one because it's one of my like favorite like stories that I've ever had a inkling of an idea of.
I think it's like pretty fun too. Anything really to do with time, I feel is pretty fun because you can really do about anything that you really want, and regardless of like how crazy the concepts are, like if you're already in the mind frame of time, then everything else is irrelevant. So you can't like say, oh, like this doesn't happen or this couldn't happen, because it technically could, as long as it just sticks with the timeline of time that
Yeah.
has been here. And so I don't know. I think it's a definitely like a huge arc of a story, and I definitely think getting some feedback and some people talking about it, like it would be cool to have like some ideas about that and actually have them put into it, like what they would like to see, like would you like to see an episode go here, or is there something like personal to you that that you would think would be cool to have them, these characters, experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's like it can get really emotional. And I think a lot of time based stuff, like you don't really see a lot of emotion out of a lot of like time movies.
I
And
think it depends. There's definitely some out there that are just like, you guys just did that to do that. But there's other ones that are really awesome. And then there's
yeah,
action ones that are awesome too. Like my favorite, like honestly, probably like my favorite type of movie is a time loop movie. I love time loop movies like so much. And like time loop episodes, like going back to Supernatural. Supernatural is one of the best time loop episodes I've ever seen. But like maybe not the first season of the show, but it would be pretty cool if we figured out a way that something is wrong with the time machine and there's like a time loop. But of course, it'd be one of those episodes that like the worst possible things happen. Like, I mean, obviously we wouldn't kill James because think that'd be too suspicious, but we'd kill somebody important like Tyler or something like that. And like the audience is going to freak the F out. And then we, loop it back and you're like, what? Like, what are we doing here? Like, we literally watched like 20 episodes of the show and we've never seen a time loop. Like something is wrong with the time machine. But it'd be kind of cool if like in that kind of way, like the time machine itself was a character, that they almost have to like take care of it.
Right, because I mean, really, anybody that gets into it, depending on like where they set it, could really mess up some stuff. And then if they have any like say in what they want to happen, like, yeah, it really could mess a lot of things up.
Ooh, okay. This might be getting a little too far ahead of ourselves, but I don't want to forget this idea. So, what if, let's say, like a character that we really like, like James or Tyler or maybe even Blake, we start liking him later on. So, like in season 2, um, he's the one that gets stuck in the prison or something. And of course, it's detrimental for him to be there because of, whatever skill set that he brings to the team. And they don't have him for like 3 or 4 episodes or something ridiculous. But in doing so, they've upset like the balance of everything. So it's almost like all these time shifts that keep happening without him because he's stuck in this cell and everything's passing him by is messing with the balance of the time machine. So then it ends up starting to loop everything. So the whole thing is like, in order to stop the loop, they have to get to this, this time prison, that's at the bottom of the ocean or something ridiculous. I don't know if it's at the bottom of the ocean. I'm just talking, but like that would be kind of cool if like there was a balance to it. It's almost like, maybe when this whole series is over, you realize that like everything had to happen in a certain way and everything happened for a reason. Like the time machine existed for a reason. Like it had to exist for a reason. I have no idea what that would be. Maybe we'll run this like for, I mean, we're going to do this podcast for the foreseeable future. So, maybe a couple months from now, we'll jump into season 2 or 3 and, go 4 or 5 seasons and figure out exactly how we would end it. But I would like that idea of that everything happens for a reason was kind of the moral of this show.
Well, I think that gives me a lot to ponder about, like, why is it that a time machine is made? Like, for what reason does somebody make it? But you have to wonder, like, yeah, like, why is the time machine relevant past the time that it's being made? Like, why is it that a time machine stays around?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, I get that it alters time, but, like, what makes it stay in those timelines?
Yeah, like why doesn't the time machine itself disappear?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was saying like it'd be kind of cool if you almost made it like an extra character and it had its own kind of not like it's talking or anything, but it had its own like personality traits that was really mysterious as to why it has to exist at the same time as all these other things. And there's so many stories out there that are similar to that where it's like, just because the bad guy's controlling it or the good guy's controlling it doesn't necessarily mean that either one of those things is good or is going to bring balance to the universe. It's a mix of a lot of different things and it's being the right place, the right time and all that. And like I said, still working out all the kinks as far as where that's going to go. But I think as just a initial pitch of what this show would be, I think that'd be awesome. And I'm not so sure about the title. I think it's so vague, but if anybody has a better title out there for a show like this, like definitely like comment on this on Facebook or Instagram or whatever and like let us know, because like I like the name, but I feel like it needs a little bit of spicing up, but I don't want it to be like cheesy either.
You could just do time plus spice. Spicy time.
Spicy time.
Sounds like a dish that you'd get at a Chinese restaurant. Can I get some spicy thyme, please?
Yeah, with the side of time travel.
All right, well, I think that's a pretty good look at time. And, I mean, that gives me a lot to think about. Like, I'm actually excited to, like, do another episode to, like, further that idea.
Yeah, I think it's about time that we call it quits on this particular episode. But, you know, we want to thank everybody for giving us your time in listening. No, we really appreciate it, and we love all the interactions. So definitely like us, follow us, subscribe, share. Like, let's make these things a reality. We started uploading to YouTube now, so real easy to share those as well. We uploaded them to our studios channel, which is Professional Dragon Slayers Studios. So if you just search that on YouTube or just Storytime Pitches, I'm sure it'll pop up. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff on there, including like older movies that we made back on our iPhones and stuff like that. Fun little things. You know, we're not huge production connoisseurs or anything, but yeah, we filmed some things on our iPhones and edit them on the computer. And, you know, our ideas and our stories are there. They're just, you know, not huge movie budgets.
Right. And you get to see my horrible acting.
It's not bad. Don't listen to him. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll definitely have some more content for you guys in the future.
Alrighty. Well, I'm Kurt.
And I'm Josh. This is Storytime Pitches.